Hi, I'm Marilyn Tate, and this is my Module 16 for Educational Finance Missing Booster Club Funds. So, summarizing this case study, $50 in ticket sales have gone missing after a basketball game. The parent in charge of the gate collections, Mrs. Bowman, had met with the principal just right before, not long before the game, and she had requested that the PTA fund a trip to New York for her daughter to participate in a parade for cheerleading. This parent was a very light on volunteer in the past, did lots for the school, uh, but the building principal still denied her request and told her that those types of funds need to be used for the good of the whole student body as opposed to just one student. Um, an attendee at the game had commented to Mr. Stevens that he had just paid at the gate with a $50 bill, but when Mr. Stevens and a security guard had counted the funds that were collected after the game, there was no $50 bill. So, Category 1, Problem Identification and Analysis. What do I know? Well, this is George Washington Middle School. It has a declining enrollment and funding. The PTA is highly involved in their fundraising. The principal is Mr. Stevens. Mrs. Bowman is a highly involved PTA member. Mr. Stevens and Mrs. Bowman had previously had a good relationship, from what I can tell, with Mr. Stevens even providing accolades for her daughter's accomplishments over the school announcements. Mrs. Bowman was looking for money to fund her daughter's trip. Mr. Stevens denied that request. Mr. Stevens normally had two parents working the gate. The crowd was at capacity that night, so they made a lot of money. Mr. Stevens was very busy during the game. Mr. Dumas, the man that had talked with Mr. Stevens, paid with a $50 bill. The collections were $50 short, and there was no $50 bill in them. And Mr. Stevens counted the bank bag with a security guard. Now, what I need to know, how many people were collecting the gate proceeds? It didn't tell me that. Where were the discarded tickets? What did they do with them? Throw them away? I don't know. Are there any procedures in place for dealing with damaged tickets? And it said they have careful procedures in place for dealing with gate collections, but it didn't state what those were. How many people counted the gate proceeds before placing them in the bag and giving it to Mr. Stevens? Was it counted? And are there procedures in place for counting collections as well? What procedures were volunteers aware of? Did they know what to do? I also wondered, was there a larger bill in the bank bag that would have been used to give that would have meant they used the $50 bill to give change? And could someone have mistakenly given the $50 bill to someone, like instead of a 20 or a 5 or something? Okay, so my proposed plan of action. First, you just need to speak with everybody that worked the gate and collected funds that night. I would want to speak with Mr. Dumas as well. See if he knew anything, see if he saw, where she put the $50 bill. I would use each of those volunteers to find, answers, hopefully, to the what I need to know questions. If there were any security cameras, I would check those. I would try to somehow maybe get a message out to parents that maybe we had given someone the wrong change, and did anyone notice they were given too much change? And that would be a way of, if someone came forward and said that, finding out that Mrs. Bowman had not taken the money. And then I would next, after it was all said and done, I would create detailed procedures for cash collections for anything where you're handling cash. That would include having at least one staff member involved, and preferably an administrator, and then one other person to take part in counting the money and balancing it with what they should have gotten. I would also ensure that these procedures included a policy that requires at least 2 people in possession of cash funds at all times, so that one person is not left alone with them. I would also make sure there are procedures for dealing with the damaged tickets, so that those are put into a box or something like that, so they're not just thrown away. Category 3, resolution based on the success of all students. I would create a system of checks and balances when dealing with cash funds. I would seek faculty assistance for working the gates and concessions, and if you can pay them, that's a good way to get them to do that. I would also want to reiterate to everybody the purpose of these funds and what they do for the student body, and how important they are. And then I would provide detailed training on the policies and procedures for any staff members, parents, volunteers, anyone that dealt with cash. Then I think it would be good to provide a printed checklist that they go through each time they're working with cash, getting it a change fund, or and then turning in money that's been collected, and even a list of guidelines that they would have with them at all times. So debriefing the problem, what was I thinking? I was thinking, why wasn't there a better system of checks and balances in place? Because it doesn't really seem like there was. Nothing was said about, multiple people being involved. The principal should have sought faculty help beforehand, I think, to work with with gate and even concessions for working with money. And then I would think, was there anybody else? I thought, was there anybody else that could have done this? What was I feeling? I was confused by a lot of how they did things. There were a lot of things missing, a lot of information missing. I was a little bit distrustful of Mrs. Bowman, definitely. And just the whole writing a note then that there were damaged tickets, and then yet the tickets were just not there. And it was really frustrating to me, how it all happened, and seemingly the lack of planning and procedures. What I valued the parent involvement in the school and the obvious sense of community that the school has, that so many parents volunteer. Category 4, debriefing the problem, unresolved issues. I would want to know, how can this be prevented in the future? Was Mrs. Bowman upset with Mr. Stevens after asking for the funding for the trip? And then I would think, how can I address this problem without hurting anyone's feelings? Because if Mrs. Bowman hadn't done anything, taken the money, I definitely wouldn't want to hurt her feelings or make her upset. So category 5, provide evidence that you as the leader promote the academic success and personal well-being of every student by ensuring effective and efficient management of the school or district to promote student social and academic learning. So component 1, how would I as the school leader promote effective and efficient management of the school or district? I think that Mr. Stevens should have placed more than one parent at event duties, which he did. He used pre-numbered tickets, and that was good. And that he enlisted the security guard to help him with the counting of the money, and accompanying him to make the deposits. So that was effective and efficient. Component 2, how do you as the school leader promote the social learning of every student? You need to reinforce the importance of funds that are raised for the student good. Set an example of tactfully seeking the truth and not jumping to conclusions, even though I kind of thought it's probably Mrs. Bowman. You don't know that for sure, and you need to find out as much as you can without upsetting people. And then provide opportunity for other people to be involved, and as far as their input and just helping out, specifically staff members that are trusted. Now, how do I, as a school leader, promote student academic learning? Well, Mr. Stevens followed the policy of using school-raised funds for the good of all students, which is absolutely necessary. He did not bow to a highly involved parent who was obviously, he had dealt with a lot of the times over the other students' needs. And his protection of the school funds can ensure availability of those monies for academic purchases. So that is my Module 16. I can't believe that that's it for this course. It was a great course. I learned so much. Thank you.